The next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 4971 in the name of Drew Smith on work not play. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Could I ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons now? And could I ask members who are leaving the chamber to do so quietly, and guests who are leaving the gallery to also do so quietly? Thank you very much. I call on Drew Smith to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank all of those members who have supported this motion for the opportunity to have it debated in the Scottish Parliament today. And can particularly also thank my colleague Patricia Ferguson for her support on this issue, and I'm aware that she can't take part in the debate. She's on parliamentary business at the Committee of the Regions. Can I refer you, Presiding Officer, and other members to my register of interests, not as a performing artist, but as a past member of the SDC General Council, to which the MU, the Musicians' Union, is affiliated. The trade union movement has and continues to shape my politics, and can I take the opportunity at the beginning of this debate to congratulate the MU for all that they do to represent musicians, to support a successful music industry, and to remind us that all musicians, or that musicians are workers too. And can I also, Presiding Officer, welcome Rab Noakes, a member of the MU Executive Committee, Fraser Spears and Bill Martin, members of the Regional Committee, and Jen Hunter, the MU's Regional Officer, to the Visitors' Gallery. Music enriches our lives as listeners and spectators. Those of us who can play or who have had the opportunity to learn are enriched, and in common with amateurs, many professional and semi-professionals musicians love making music. However, for most, the job of being a musician is unlikely to enrich them in monetary terms. The MU's excellent publication, The Working Musician, is the culmination of a major research project which was commissioned by the MU last year. In this document, we have brought together some sobering statistics about the reality of life for the jobbing musician, which I want to use this debate to share with Parliament and with the public at large. More than half of the musicians surveyed in this project, 56%, earn less than £20,000 a year. Almost two-thirds of working musicians are not regularly able to contribute to a pension scheme. 60% of musicians report that they have worked for free in the last 12 months. The evidence detailed in The Working Musician is the result of a survey of more than 2,000 workers and in-depth interviews with both musicians and industry insiders. Most working musicians are multi-skilled. 4 out of 5 have been performing for more than 5 years. Two-thirds have invested 4 or more years in learning their craft through formal training and education, and 40% hold a degree in music. Other self-employed workers face similar challenges, but the situation for musicians is of a different scale. I mentioned pension contributions a moment ago, and can I return to that? At present, 1 in 5 of all workers are without pension provision. 1 in 3 self-employed workers don't have a pension. But for musicians, the figure is only 35% paying in to a pension. The MU undertook this piece of research because they suspected the scale of the problem amongst their membership. But they were also prompted by the explosion in the number of musicians reporting an expectation of working for free during the London Olympics. The legacy of the Cultural Olympiad should not be impoverished music makers. And I would ask the Minister, or the Cabinet Secretary, I apologise, to think about how this issue can be specifically considered as we prepare for Glasgow 2014. Nearly all of us love music. I enjoy gigs, music festivals, and some colleagues might be surprised to hear even the odd orchestral performance in opera when I can. We all have different favourite bands, different pubs that we go to hear music, clubs, companies that we support. So why is it that we all value music, but we fail to value musicians? The UK and Scottish music industries are extremely successful. Money is made, but does not always go to those who make music. UK music exports amount to £17 billion a year. The UK, alongside Sweden and the United States, is one of only 3 countries in the world which are net exporters of music. Half of all album sales in the UK are recorded by British artists. The British music market is the 3rd largest in the world, and 10% of all the recorded music sold in the world is British. British orchestras play to UK audiences of 4.18 million. They toured in 39 different countries, performed 457 concerts, and generated an income of nearly £150 million. Britain loves music, Scotland loves music. One of the reasons I ended up in my city of Glasgow was because of our live music scene. We are recognised as one of the world's foremost musical places, including even by UNESCO. As Celtic Connections continues in Glasgow this week, so does the rock, pop and indie scene. Glasgow's music scene is legendary, and it stretches across the whole spectrum from contemporary and classical to Celtic and country. Its venues are equally varied, and the city hosts an average of 130 music events each week. That's more than any other place in Scotland. Yet many gigging artists, session musicians, orchestra players, music arrangers and teachers are told by promoters in the industry and by others, "I've got a great gig for you, lots of exposure, a great support slot, but sorry, no pay." The industry itself has a lot to answer for. Polly McNeill, my former Labour colleague, was closely involved with musicians and promoters in efforts to empower artists and to improve their working conditions. However, outside of the industry, there are problems too. Charities are some of the worst offenders. "It's for a good cause" is a statement musicians will often hear. Most of us will have attended events, possibly paying a ticket price, where the sound person is paid, the bar staff is paid, the venue is hired, but the musicians are told, "We don't have a budget for music." Fraser Spears, who is in the gallery today, has said, "The problem occurs when a charity event approaches asking for a band to play just for half an hour, maybe an hour at most. No fee is available. Often I have financed a 4-piece band only to discover that the PA company, sound crew, lighting rig and guest speaker have all been engaged at their regular commercial rate." Now, Presiding Officer, there is nothing wrong with musicians who want to donate to a cause doing so, but it should be just that, a donation, not an expectation. Every time a musician gigs for free, the likelihood of others being asked to do so increases. Every time someone has to give up music as a job, every one of us who loves music misses out. Musicians, just like other workers, are facing tough times. Their income is threatened by illegally downloaded music, which means they are having to rely on live performance fees more and more. Making music can be a career. It isn't just a hobby. They are professionals like any other and should be recognised as such. I don't have much more time available to me in this short debate this afternoon, Presiding Officer, but can I make an appeal to the Scottish Government to ensure specifically that wherever music is part of an event that the Government is involved in supporting, work is not play and work should be paid?
Thank you. I now call Richard Lyle to be followed by Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm also pleased to take part in this debate today and thank Drew Smith for bringing this to the Chamber. My family has had a long association with the Musicians' Union. As I grew up, my father was a well-known trumpet player in the Lanarkshire area. He was the Eddie Calvert of his day. For those who do not know, Eddie Calvert was a famous English trumpet player who enjoyed his greatest successes in the 1950s. Calvert had his first UK number one in 1954 with "O Mine Papa." My father, Richard Lyle, was a fervent musician union member, and I well remember him taking part in other union activities in the 60s and 70s. My father played in a dance band. In those days he earned £15 a week in his day job, but could supplement the family income by playing at least 2 nights a week throughout Lanarkshire. This debate centres on present actions of hall owners or club owners who actually want musicians to play for nothing in their hall or club. When I first heard of this, I was appalled. I was in fact informed by a campaigner that owners of halls or clubs force musicians to sell tickets for their gig, and they have to have a certain number sold prior to performance to perform. Hall and club owners now, I would suggest, have their cake and eat it by not paying the musician and getting an income from ticket sales and food and drink sales. This cannot be right. It was the London Olympics that brought this escalating problem to the attention of many. And whilst I can see the benefits the London Games brought to many, I think it's unfair to ask such an important part of the Games and the supporting activities to be done for free. We must all remember that musicians train and develop their skills as a career choice, not as a hobby, and must be compensated for the work that they undertake. Research has shown that more than half of the professional musicians still earn less than $20,000 a year, and 60% have worked for free for over the past year. These figures are particularly stark when you consider that the UK Government failed to include music in its £6 million boost to the creative industries. Due to low incomes, only 35% of musicians pay into a pension scheme, which is today's economic uncertainty is a worrying trend. Compounding the problem is that a large part of today's society thinks it's acceptable to download music for free, and if they do pay for it, it's often extremely cheap. This has led to many professional musicians relying on live performances to make up for their loss of earnings. And if this too is threatened, many musicians will no longer be able to continue in their chosen profession. Scotland is known for its world-class musicians. However, if this problem is not resolved, we will no longer be able to make this claim, as many musicians will have to face the stark reality that a career as a professional musician is not a viable option. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Ruth Davidson to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I would like to start by congratulating Drew Smith on securing this debate, and I'm pleased to be able to explore some of the important issues that it raises today. Like many others, I think it is important to begin by recognising the important place of live music in our culture. The motion focuses on professional musicians in Glasgow and across Scotland, and this is an issue important precisely because we have such a proud tradition of live music in our country. From major international acts to traditional musicians, singers and performers, Scotland has a vibrant and diverse music scene. The public perception is often that professional musicians play to crowds of thousands and are amongst the highest earners in our society. However, whilst that may be true for a very small number of performers who are in the public eye, the reality for most professional musicians is very different. Indeed, recent research conducted by the Musicians' Union highlighted one of the main challenges facing those seeking to make a living from music. According to the research, more than half of professional musicians earn less than £20,000 a year, with many taking home considerably less than that. It is worth identifying the difference between those who perform for enjoyment and those who do so to try and make a living. We should note that musicians have a variety of motivations for performing. Those who play for enjoyment are often in competition with those who are trying to make a living from music. And there are, of course, those who use music as a means of earning a bit of extra cash somewhere in the middle alongside another job. Often people who are just starting out and are trying to make it as professional musicians, for them free gigs may give them the exposure that they need early on in their careers, while other musicians playing for free, possibly on the same bill in the same venue, may have no such desire. Therefore, it's very hard to differentiate between professional performers and by those who play as a hobby, as they often play on the same stages. However, that doesn't mean that there are not real issues here. I think there are, and there are issues which need to be looked at. And it does seem as if there is a culture in some areas, highlighted by the Work Not Play campaign, where aspiring musicians are taken advantage of by venues or promoters. If someone is making money from the playing of music, be it a promoter, a bar owner or a venue manager, then it is only fair that the profit is shared with the musicians. This is a challenging issue to properly address at a local level, but I am aware of concerns about professional musicians being asked to do unpaid gigs attached to last year's Olympic Games. I know that the organisers of Glasgow 2014 will want to be aware of these concerns as preparations for the Commonwealth Games continue. Where this is the case, in the wider sense, common sense suggests that musicians should be remunerated for their work. However, there will also be events which may not break even and for which profit was never a primary concern. And it would be difficult in such circumstances to expect a promoter who may be investing their own time and effort and money into the event to pay out of their own pocket if there had never been an agreed commercial contract. The campaign website, also referred to in the motion, also includes the experiences of a number of musicians, some of whom describe being pressurised into performing at charity events for little or no pay. And clearly, there are situations where bands may wish to offer their services for free to a charity that they support, or for other reasons. This could range from bands supporting national campaigns, such as Live Aid, or it could be a Ceilidh band waiving a fee for performing at a friend's wedding. But using guilt to compel musicians into playing for free is a worrying road to go down, and this should always be at the behest of the musicians. We also need to be aware of charitable gigs which aren't so charitable after all. A number of reports of events billed as charity events with high ticket prices, but with very little money actually going to charities. These often see organisers and promoters taking their usual fee, while the musicians are expected to play for nothing. The key thing is that musicians should not be exploited by unscrupulous promoters. If musicians are happy to perform with no fee, that is their right, but nobody should be pressured into working for free. It is good that the Work Not Play campaign is raising public awareness of the issues. Often members of the public may believe that musicians are being well paid when the opposite is true. Years, often decades of hard work goes into becoming a professional musician, and they should be expected to be paid fairly for their work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Stuart McMillan to be followed by Ian Gray.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I welcome the debate that we are having here this afternoon. Certainly this is very much an important issue, and I congratulate Drew Smith for bringing it to the Chamber. Certainly as members will know, and I play the bagpipes, and I know how hard it actually is to learn an instrument. I mean, there are years of hard work and dedication that goes in before someone actually becomes proficient in any instrument. And certainly I can fully appreciate the frustration felt by musicians when they actually are expected to play for free. Certainly for me, it's a hobby. It's not a profession. I always considered playing my instrument as a hobby, and I never ever considered it to be a profession at some point in the future. Now, obviously, I mean, the recent report we've heard from the Musicians' Union highlighting that the 56% of musicians that were surveyed earned less than £20,000 per year. Now, that's £20,000 isn't really a great deal amount of money, particularly for a professional musician. Now, it's not a great reward for a career which has involved many years of the training, the rehearsal and the dedication, not to mention the personal and the financial sacrifices to achieve a level of skill to enable someone to actually become a professional musician. Yet, also, the motion highlights that too many people seem to regard music as a hobby rather than a career. Now, there have always been examples of musicians being asked to play and work for free for charity, certainly as Drew Smith indicated. But obviously with the recent London Olympics, there seemed to be the blanket policy of not paying for music, and recently others have started to do the same. Now, this has had an impact on work available for musicians, with reports of some venues trawling around open mic nights, looking for those just starting out and getting to play at the venues for free rather than actually paying for professional musicians. Now, I understand the arguments about showcasing, particularly new bands and new singers and new professional musicians actually wanted to break into the scene. I understand the showcasing. I also understand the providing of an opportunity for someone to actually go and play. But I do also appreciate that there needs to be a balance if that is actually going to take place. There has to be the balance as compared to what appears to be kind of the norm now of getting musicians to play for free. Now, to be a top-class musician takes years and years of dedication and study, and it's a full-time job. And for that fact that musicians enjoy their jobs, well, that is certainly largely true. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have to have any value. It should be remembered that the enjoyable part of a musician's job is often their time on the stage or in the studio. However, these enjoyable creative times are short in comparison to the work that goes on behind the scenes, the travelling, the rehearsing, the administration, etc. Often a 1-hour gig is part of a musician's 12-hour day. Now, as someone who I've played at many an event in the past, and certainly when I was younger, when I was playing at weddings, and the wedding might start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but your day is over. I mean, you don't do anything at all that day apart from go and play your pipes at that wedding. So certainly when someone is being paid to go and do a job, it's not just about the period of time when you're performing. You're getting paid for your whole time for that day. And that's the way it certainly, I would suggest it should be. Now, music, it's a difficult career to sustain, because unless you make it to the very top, it can be so poorly paid. Now, obviously, most of the musician unions, 30,000 members, already have to do their jobs alongside music in order to make ends meet. Now, I'm conscious of time, Presiding Officer, that certainly while highlighting the current problems faced by working musicians, it's still necessary that we have support for musicians of the future. And certainly we need to kind of do what we can to make sure that the study of music is available to basically all who actually have the ability and also all who actually want to do it. And that's certainly why I congratulate the Scottish Government on the additional £1 million of funding to provide schools to buy musical instruments. And I also actually congratulate all local authorities in Scotland for the excellent music tuition that does go on across the country. I understand that we had a debate in here only a short time ago in terms of the varying fees sometimes that actually are applied in local authorities. But in the main, local authorities do a tremendous job in terms of the music tuition and kind of the singing that they provide. Now, certainly to conclude with, Presiding Officer, I do welcome the debate and hope it actually does go some way towards highlighting to the general public, as well as those who run venues, of the importance of music as a career and why professional musicians actually deserve, like any other professional, to be paid for the services. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Gray.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. An American writer once wrote that music is the fourth great material want, first food, then clothes, then shelter, then music. And we certainly, I think, all have powerful memories of music from our own lives. I can Still remember over 40 years ago, the first live gig I ever went to, 900 people, some 300 too many, in the Inverness Cally Ballroom to see Rory Gallagher. That's a memory that has stayed with me for a long time. I remember at the Usher Hall in 1991 seeing the St. Petersburg Symphony Orchestra play the Leningrad Symphony on the very night when tanks were once again rolling towards their city. And I've spoken before in the chamber about the emotional impact of seeing the Simon Bolivar orchestra play in the Raploch in Stirling. But I also remember a folk festival in Glen Nevis featuring nobody that I've ever heard of before or since, but somehow managing to channel the grandeur of the setting into a memory which will live with me forever. Or stumbling across a jazz band in a hotel bar in Inverness featuring a guitarist, part-time, but quite able to rip off John McLaughlin solos, which I thought nobody else on the planet but McLaughlin himself could play. We all need music to enrich our lives, to understand and punctuate them too, and it's not just stars that we need. Currently, my daughter is an instrumental teacher in Haddington, the town I live in, and as such, she's part of a very rich music scene in that small town. And I say rich, but that's kind of ironic, because none of those involved, no matter how talented, are in any way rich at all. They all scrape a living, managing an ever-shifting portfolio of teaching jobs, youth work, and indeed non-music anything which pays, with performing and recording all on top of that. And even when they do have a gig where they are meant to be paid, I know that they often have trouble actually getting the money out of the promoter or the venue. So the figures that Drew Smith read out, I don't find surprising that 56% of musicians earn less than £20,000 a year, and that 2/3 of them have no pensions at all. We have sometimes in this Parliament discussed the iniquity of industries who use interns, tell young people that they have to work for nothing in order to show that they can do the job and gain experience. But that is something which is absolutely endemic in the music industry, hence the figure of 60% of musicians who say they have had to work for nothing in the last year. So I think we should support this campaign, and there are other things we should do too. We should support anything which increases the opportunity for paid employment for our musicians. This campaign, I think, is related to the Let the Children Play campaign about instrumental tuition in our schools in Scotland. Because just as we must avoid local authorities putting charges up for instrumental tuition in our schools as a soft touch at budget time, we must ensure that they don't also see cutting the number of instrumental tutors as a soft touch, because that is exactly the kind of work which many musicians use in order to get by so that they can play the music that they want to do. Luther once said, "Next to the word of God, the noble art of music is the greatest treasure in the world. For those of us who can't sing a note or play an instrument, we need musicians and not just the stars. We should welcome the Work Not Play campaign. We should value and invest in that treasure of music and do everything that we can to support it."
Thank you. Can I now invite Fiona Hislop to respond to the debate? Cabinet Secretary, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Drew Smith on this motion, which I think has enabled a very healthy and indeed, as we've just heard, an impassioned number of speeches about how we best encourage support for Scotland's music industry. I think Drew Smith set out very well a lot of the issues, the pensions issue, the social expectation of playing for free issues, the impact of digital downloading and what that also means. And I think it is an area that I hope we will come back to again, because I think not just a members' business debate, it's an area I think we need to look at more closely as we go forward. It's an industry which I'm sure we all agree is an essential part of the fabric of Scotland's culture, and today's debate marks a critical step towards ensuring that we place a value on our musicians' art and performances. Scotland's music culture and the industry which delivers it is world-class,
And as Culture Secretary, it's my duty to ensure that this part of Scotland's identity is promoted, nurtured and developed. But there are limits, I'm sure members will understand, of what the Scottish Government can directly do in terms of commissioners, and we can't direct private venues or charities or weddings, etc., to pay. But what we can do is support the campaign and to raise awareness of the concerns that have been raised here today. The latest Scottish Annual Business Statistics tell us that Scotland's performing arts industries contribute over £77 million to Scotland's economy in 2010, 460 registered businesses, turning over 160 million and providing 4,700 jobs. And in terms of musicians specifically, the annual population survey, which calculates on an occupation basis as opposed to registered businesses, tells us that there are around 3,000 working musicians in Scotland. And we know that musicians tend to operate a portfolio approach, as we've heard, to their business, which centres around their networks and reputation to secure the next piece of work. And although the music industry necessarily operates in a flexible manner, the compulsion to work for free has the potential to compromise the professional integrity of the industry and create insecurity and hardship for musicians themselves, as we've heard in the debate. This government continues to support the music sector in Scotland in a number and a range of ways. Our national performing companies, which are the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, Scottish Ballet, National Theatre of Scotland, Royal Scottish National Orchestra and Scottish Opera, operate under contracts with their musicians, and the terms and conditions, including rates, are cleared by the Musicians' Union. And I appreciate there is a wide music industry spectrum and that the national performing companies are at the more structured end of the scale. But I do think it is important that we look at models of best practice as set out by the campaign, and those that commission live performances who previously might have expected for performances for free should at least consider minimum compensation for musicians' performance time in terms, for example, of the living wage aspect as well. We expect it in other areas. Why aren't we expecting it in this area? I think the points about performances around the Commonwealth Games made by Drew Smith are well made. I will take that forward. And of course, Scotland loves music, but we need to love our musicians. And we also need to make sure we respect and recompense the work and indeed the culture that they carry out in inspiring our nation. I do think a fairer deal all around for the performers and the sector in the country needs to be engendered. And sadly, obviously, the Musicians' Union survey, the recent Creative Scotland Commission survey responses might confirm the value that our culture places on our music. But this dilemma faced by our performing musicians needs to be addressed by event managers as well as artists themselves. And I do commend the Musicians' Union for their Fair Play Guide, which sets out a very simple model for musicians in managing their businesses. Through my work with the culture sector, I recognise that the artists who earn a living through art or culture have their art as their focus and might not have business planning as their top priority. But what I do know is that that commitment and passion delivered by artists is something which sets them apart from other businesses. And the artist's passion might sustain their brand and image, but unfortunately not necessarily their livelihood. And I do believe that this simple guide could help unlock some of our musicians' potential through the clarity that they will experience and defining their activities and the articulation of their choices. Patterns are likely to emerge from the exercise and planning, highlighting the venues, events which the genre might tend towards supporting in kind, and those with a commercial relationship is emerging and where there's more stability. And of course, we recognise the challenging economic conditions faced from the music industry, from artists and their managers through to labels, promoters and venues, and critically high street retailers. And we've seen the difficulties faced by HMV, for example. So what is required is the cultivation of more proactive support of and by that community, not just the music makers and performers, but those who stand to benefit from the production, promoters, venues, retailers, and most importantly of all, music fans and audiences. And only today we have seen the launch of Create at the University of Glasgow. It's a £5 million research focus, a consortium of 7 universities, which is looking at copyright and new business models in the creative economy. Is very important. And as was mentioned in the debate, live performances will become of increased importance at the time, for example, of digital download. So we must strive to develop a culture that recognises the interdependency of that community, increasing the intrinsic value of music itself. As a nation, one of our defining characteristics is our passionate love of music, and we must focus our efforts on creating the most supportive commercial environment possible for our artists, our labels, our venues, our retailers, so they can earn a living from entertaining, enlightening and informing and inspiring our audiences. So I hope that the issue can be addressed through mutual recognition from both artists and commissioners, musicians placing value on their own work as well, not too readily accepting to deliver the business for no fee, and that commissioners might consider the right to be compensated for a fair hours or 2 hours work, as we've discussed. This government believes in investing and supporting music despite real pressures on budgets. I have maintained the Youth Music Initiative, which has inspired so many. It's in its 10th year. We've also seen great strides forward. For example, the Scottish Brass Band Association has seen the organisation grow by 500% in 5 years. And there is a point where we're actually creating more demand. We're creating more capacity for musicians. We're inspiring more young people to take part in music. Some of them will have, as Stuart McMillan mentioned, a future with music as a hobby, but some will want to move on. And I think also, if you look at the success from the Youth Music Initiative of the support for Feis Ross, established a successful Cayley Trail programme across the Highlands, providing valuable professional development and employment opportunities. We're looking to extend that into the Central Belt. Now, that provides a transition from playing for experience to paid performances. And the Feis Ross Trail had 78 performances to over 5,000 people throughout the summer. So some of our challenges are the increased passion and activity around music, but that also has to be supported by structures around in order to support it. More music that we produce, the more audiences that we grow locally and indeed nationally, the more music festivals we have, the greater the expectation sometimes that access to music should be free and that musicians shouldn't necessarily need to be paid. But as a government, we will continue to support the music industry through our partners and our agencies, through the initiatives and the programmes. But we also need the various parts of the industry to come together, and I'd be more than happy to help facilitate that, to make sure that the lives and, importantly, the livelihoods of people involved in music in Scotland can be respected, can be promoted, and our music can be loved for generations to come. But I do think it's important that we take time in this Parliament to recognise the importance of music to our country, but more importantly, respect for our musicians that provide that music.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes Drew Smith's debate on Work Not Play, and I now suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2:30 p.m.